Bom dia.
Good morning. Welcome to the third international webinar for hydrogen certification, the third webinar of a series of 5 webinars. I hope that you're all excited for the discussions and presentations we're going to have today. Before we start the event officially, I would like to give you a few technical pieces of information that normally are questions that people ask us at the beginning of our webinars. My name is José Zlokovic. People call me Zeka. If you want to ask, call me Zeka, there's no problem. Coordinator of the NIDAS International Consulting Company, and I'm going to be the moderator of our event today. Uh, our event is being broadcasted live on YouTube, so please send your any questions you have as soon as possible and as objectively as possible in our chat room. The AHK Rio de Janeiro YouTube will display afterwards the recording of this event. This is a public event, and it's always going to be transmitted in an English channel for those who would like to hear in English. If you're hearing here in the Portuguese channel, you're gonna understand the translation automatically, and for those in the English channel, you can hear the English version. So with that, I would like to call to the floor now our, our colleague Patricia Costa from the Ministry of Mining and Energy. She is the coordinator of the Chamber of Regulation and Legal Framework. Patricia, the floor is yours. Good morning, Zeka. My name is Patricia Nakashi. I'm from the Ministry of Mining and Energy. First of all, I'd like to thank NIDAS, HK, and everyone for inviting me to participate in this third webinar about hydrogen certification. As you mentioned, I am coordinator of the legal framework for the National Hydrogen Program. This program has been organized by the Ministry of Mining and Energy and has the participation of several other ministries as well. There are 6 main axes of actuation. And in terms of regulation, which is under my coordination, we have been doing some work at the end of last year to link the main subjects for discussion. And the subject of certification is one of the most relevant within this framework of the regulation chamber and has been listed one of the priorities here for discussion. So we have, just to remind you, we have a partnership with the German government. It's been reinforced in the beginning of this year with the German Chancellor. He came here to visit us, and we were able to reinforce this partnership. And especially regarding the subject of hydrogen, is very important for this partnership. And these discussions are very important with the European Union as well. And they're supporting us with the actions for the hydrogen program here. And we also wanted to have a discussion between the public and private sectors and the academy as well. And I think that a webinar like this one, which especially like the one we have today, which includes a lot of the private sector, is it's really important to consolidate the discussions we've been having. So I wish you all great discussions and great debates. And I'm happy
This
to be
meeting
here.
is
Thank
being
you.
recorded.
Okay, thank you, Patricia, for your welcoming words and also for complementing our vision. I'll call now Andrei Fritzer. He's a controller of H2 Brazil program at GIZ. The floor is yours. Good morning, Zeka. Thank you very much. Thank you, Patricia, as well. Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the third webinar regarding hydrogen certification here. This is another activity between Germany and Brazil and our partnership. We already have the project H2, which is a great cooperation. H2 Brazil, which is a cooperation between Brazil and Germany for the sustainable development of GAZ and the Ministry of Energy and Mining. Uh, it's a cooperation for the development with the German government. We are looking at the new potential of Brazil for green hydrogen, and H2 Brazil as the goal of gather all the institution and people involved in the development of green hydrogen here in Brazil. I expect that this webinar is useful for all projects and all projects that are presented here. And I would like to wish all those here good luck. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrei. So I would like to call the representative of the European Union delegation here in Brazil, Alexander Kuhl, is going to talk a little bit about the project Euroclima in this series of webinars. Alexander, welcome. The floor is yours. Thank you, Zeca. Good morning, Patricia. Good morning, Andre. Good morning, everyone. It's a big pleasure to be here with all of you. Also, thank you for the invitation to be here. I would like to thank you as well, all the speakers today who are going to share their knowledge and about the subject uh, regarding hydrogen certification. We all know, and it's really important to emphasize that again, that both in Brazil and in Europe, hydrogen offers great opportunities for uh, contributing with this sustainable development, generation of new jobs, and this diversification of our energy matrix, and fighting global climate change. For these reasons, in 2022, we defined the goals of 10 tons of domestic production plus 10 million tons of imported production of renewable hydrogen until 2030. And obviously, an essential component to achieving the second goal is the good operation of a global market of hydrogen that makes it easier for exports and imports. And the European Union is investing strongly uh, on policies and certifications with our international partners. And obviously, Brazil is a big player in this market. And not only because of the strategic partnership that we have between Brazil and European Union, but also because we consider that Brazil is already a worldwide pioneer with a very modern energy matrix and has great potential for benefiting from hydrogen and becoming one of the great producers and big players in the global market. So the European Union is really happy with this collaboration between our countries, and we want to continue this collaboration in the future and go deeper and deeper with this partnership as we move forward. The event today is a great opportunity to start doing this. So I would like to thank, I wish a great webinar for all. Thank you. Thank you, Alexander. Thank you, Patricia and Andrei. It's great when we have participants who follow the schedule correctly so we can start here on time. And this is great so that we can get all the questions from our audience. So I'd like to reinforce, if you're following us on YouTube, please send your questions on the chat rooms and we'll be able to do some trial here. And we're gonna ask them to our speakers. Our speakers will have approximately 20 minutes to do their presentations. And at every round of presentations, we're gonna address the questions received on the chat room. So I'd like to invite our first speaker today, Felipe Toro. He's the team leader of NIRAS International Consulting, and he's going to talk about the series of certification workshops in Brazil and the implications of the directive head to here in Brazil. Felipe, welcome to our webinar. You can open your camera and your mic, and the floor is yours for your presentation. Okay, thank you, Zeca. Good morning, everyone in our attendance. It's great that to have you all interests, the interest of you all in our series of webinars regarding green hydrogen and hydrogen certification. I believe that we had a lot of interest shown in our webinar. And I'm going to try to share my screen here real quick. Zeka, if you can see and all the participants can see it, please let me know.
Por favor,
Yes,
muchas
yes, it's on screen already, Felipe. Okay, nice. So
tenho agora, acho que 15 minutos para
I have now 15 minutes to do this introduction, talk a little bit about results of the last webinar to all of you.
Então, sim, meu nome é Felipe Toro.
So my name is Felipe Toro. I'm team leader here for the nearest team.
Quero dar uma
I would just like to give you an overview, a quick overview for those who don't know about our project.
Brasil,
The H2 Brazil project is financed by an international cooperation between Germany and Brazil. It's a cooperation that has been signed in 2020, 2021 with the Ministry of Energy in Brazil. We have a financial volume of approximately 34 million euros. In the beginning of the project, started in September 2021. It's going to run until December 2023. So we're going in the end phase of our project. And like I mentioned, the political partner in Brazil is the Ministry of Mining and Energy. The project is a very large project, actually. On one side, we're going to look at the main conditions for hydrogen in Brazil, and on the other side, to help the development of the market in the country and in the world. Of course, with our Brazilian partners. And that is why the project has defined 5 important work packages that our consulting company is responsible for the results of these packages. And the first one is called the structuring conditions, when we working with 8 to 11 studies for the Brazilian government for the main conditions here in Brazil. We also have disclosure and qualification. These are also very important for creating the habits that do not exist yet in Brazil and need to be reinforced. So I believe that in this cooperation, with both the structuring conditions, disclosure, and qualification, this is all in cooperation with the ministry and to reinforce these conditions here in Brazil. And on the other hand, I think it's really important to mention that 2 work packages that are related to development of the market mainly, which are innovation. There are many activities that we do with spin-offs and universities and development and research. But I think that this has been really important to create the best moment for the market and other market expansion activities as well. Many of the funds available for the project has been invested in pilot projects and demonstration projects. So
aprimorar essas
the
condições
main goal is to improve the legal, logical, and structural conditions to have development of a really green economy in Brazil. Us as NIRAS and GIZ and the ministry want to cooperate together with the Brazilian entities to really have a successful project. So us as NIRAS, we're responsible for the studies that we've been conducting with our team. We have a big team with 2 coordinators, Ceres, Felipe, and Zeka. Thank you for your work. It's been great work for the activities so far. And we also have a technical backstopping in Germany with Monica Saraiva-Panik, Mike Schmidt, and Peter Bickel. They're based in Germany and will help us with our projects and our demonstrations. And this is from 1 to 7. Many of the projects that we have that are ongoing that shows our potential, and we have discussing the potential and several scenarios. And now we are completing many of these projects. Thanks for EPE for all your cooperation. And also, we have worked with several s- uh, institutions for studies in Rio de Janeiro. We also have studies for the ministry regarding the regulatory part, the social and environmental part. We have also partners here in Brazil working on this, and international consulting companies as well, PTI, and regarding the certification part, we have organized this together with AHK and also experts like CETESB, for example. And finally, we have studies that we want to study the profitability of 5 real projects in Brazil. We're working with PTI and also with FGV for financing these green hydrogen projects. Of all of these studies, we're going to disclose the results as well for those who are interested. I'd also like to take the time to present a little bit about a program, a cooperation program called Euroclima. For this series of certification webinars, we have a cooperation with Euroclima, and this regional cooperation program wants to promote strategic partnership between European Union and Latin American and Caribbean, based on shared values and the commitment to face the climate change and loss of biodiversity. All of these global changes and loss of biodiversity are very important and very present in our continent. And general goal is to contribute with this cooperation is to contribute for a sustainable transition, resilient and inclusive, by means of efforts to mitigate and adapt the climate, including protection, restoration, conservation of biodiversity, and promotion of a circular economy. And this regional program is co-financed by the European Union about climate action in Latin America. For Brazil, we also have a general objective uh, for our country here. The main goal is to enforce the green economy policy and also with sustainable investments in Brazil, supporting the transition to a low carbon economy, considering also, among other areas, a strategic role of hydrogen in this process. We want to present out of you participants in this webinar. And we have 5 actions of Country Window Brazil together with the Corporation of European Union: green economy, bioeconomy, sustainable finances, governance and dialogues regarding a green H2 certification, and social biodiversity chains. And thank you, Andres, for your participation today, and about the social biodiversity chains as well. So this is a little bit of the context of our project. So now I'd like to take a look at the results of our webinar from March 7. As information,
Muchos participantes inscritos.
we have more than 400 participants enrolled, approximately 135 in YouTube, especially from the industrial sector and from associations. We have some recommendations for, we have some participants that had from Europe and the United States as well, and these are investors. I received many contacts after our presentation. I think the main recommendation is, the main recommendation of our last webinar was in three areas: measurement and verification of intensity of greenhouse effect gases. The models of custody was a little bit of our discussion, and here I would like to show you a little bit of our first point, summary of the main results. An important point is that CCEE in Brazil has been discussing a lot about the methodologies that are present in the world regarding certification, and the important message of CE is that it's open to adopt the most adherent methodology. I think in this case would be each pay HE. This seems to be more applicable at short term, but due to technical difficulties of the adoption, especially due to the difficulties of adopting a more wider measurement front, it has to be discussed in depth yet. Another point that was very important during our discussions of our previous webinar was a methodology that broaches the international transportation of H2 and its derivatives. It's very important since part of this low carbon hydrogen, green hydrogen, is going to be exported to Europe. So we believe that this is essential to position this as a message for Brazil, that this international transportation is very important and is going to be under the coordination of the ministry. I believe that this is an essential point for uh, trade, especially via maritime transportation. Another was the follow-up of emission system beginning until the final use of the product. And if we can say that this helps with the discussion we had, the discussion many years ago, this may delay international harmonization because there's different data from different sources and public data. And the first barrier is to find public data of reference and inventory of specific emissions for production of hydrogen. Another point that was very important for our discussion is to emphasize the off-takers, right? Siderurgy and the main final uses, and identify these uses of green hydrogen. But also for electricity, oil and gas, this would help to harmonize the discussions and understanding for the international debate. We also discussed the bottlenecks in terms of transmission that may prevent connection between electricity suppliers and producers of green H2. Many of the participants were interested in this discussion. And another point is the greater acceptation of the ISO initiative, the IPHE, and their methodology for the production of a specific standard for H2. I think this is important to accept this methodology, at least at short term. Regarding the custody models, I think we have a very interesting discussion here, not only for the book and claim model, but the mass balance model as well. Many participants indicated that they have different possibilities of business models, but this makes it difficult to control the certificates issued. And this is a subject that is related to accounting. And the mass balance model brings greater safety, but it excludes several business models in Brazil. This model would allow compliance with H2 Global and RED 2 for Europe, right? So one of the recommendations of the participants indicated in Brazil could adopt a system that mixes both models at the consumer's choice, or a hybrid system. So this is something that needs to be discussed in more detail. And if a book and claim model is implemented in Brazil, if the hybrid system does not work, it would be important to have a centralized platform to increase the reliability of the certificate market, avoiding double count. And this is one of the bottlenecks that we've seen in Europe. And finally, establishing rules and requirements that are globally accepted. And this is one of the important things that was under discussion in our last webinar in March. And one point is to analyze the framework of biomass as renewable hydrogen by the European Union. This requires more detailed discussions with Europe, adopting flexible certification mechanisms to not lock up the growth of the hydrogen sector as national and international level, ensuring competitiveness. Avoid adopting limiting criteria for H2 certification in Brazil, such as limiting technological routes for production. This is something that many of the participants said that Brazil has some bureaucracy and many technological routes available for production, and with competitiveness and with the environmental and social part, we can learn about all these technological routes for the future. And also clarify the certification process for European Union in case of H2 production is important to clarify if they occur in a location different from the location where the power is being generation is being made, and this has to be discussed with our partners in Europe. Also important to check how the H2 purchase contracts and its will be written, and H2 and derivatives for the H2 global auction. They want to absorb many of these risks for the financing with contracts for more than 10 years. It's important then to see the
energética eléctrica sella así más de 90% renovados, más tienen una variabilidad, no tiempo, ¿no? Puede ser por 5 años, puede ser por 10, ¿no? Vamos a ver.
It's going to be 5 years or 10 years, let's see, the system, but this is a point that we have to clarify. And finally, motivate instruments of flexibility in the certificate project. That's the final point. We talk about the water resource scarcity and also the carbon compensation accepted by these instruments of certificate. And finally, unify the hydrogen certificate process about green hydrogen, low carbon hydrogen, focusing on decarbonization. And I believe these ones are the results, the most important ones that I would like to clarify. Thank you so much for the participants. And finally, I'd like to give you my 2 final slides and explain the series of our webinars. And today is the 23rd May 2023. The certificate is for exporting purposes. We have 2 Highland presentation, White Martins and Vinicius. Thank you so much for all the presenters. And the next 2 events that we are having planned is July 25th, 2023, with the Brazilian experience on certification design, and suggesting to invite Renewable CCE for the hydrogen certification, and also for September 19th, with certification procedures, all the procedures of certificate at a national level, with all the experiences and all the studies of PSR results from output with the companies. And finally, I'd like to thank Patricia, Andrei, and also Alexander for the welcoming considerations, and also the agenda that I'm presenting here, the motivation. I believe that we want to do these webinars with you and share with you the results of our projects. Thank you for the organizers. And then we are having the presentation of today's agenda. 9:30, we have the certificate of H2 for exporting purposes. Luis de Carvalho of Tuve Highland in South America. And then at 10 a.m., we have the certificate of the green hydrogen, White Martins in Pernambuco case. Thank you so much, Marcos Gonzalez. And also Nuria Harman will talk about the certificate for export purposes, some case studies of CertifHy. At 11, we would like to close this public session with our closing remarks. Mr. Giovanni Machado, Director of EP. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much, Zeca, for the excellent moderation. And the floor is yours. Back to you, Zeca. Thank you so much. Thank you, Felipe, for bringing this contextualization. We receive a question to you. if you can answer, as Danilo Angelo is asking about the results of these workshops on certificate organized in H2 Brazil. Is it possible to access these results? How can we organize their presentation? Of course you can. That's the objective, the intention, the cooperation between the ministry and the German government to communicate these results as public results. Now we have most of these studies that are ongoing. We have to close them in next 6 months. So I believe it's very important that together in this coordination with the Ministry of Mines and Energy, with lots of focal points with PE, ANEL, NS, and also to inform the public, the platform that they are going to access these public results, and then they can access. In the following weeks, I believe in the following months, this strategy is going to be communicated publicly, and it's going to be public knowledge. And then we are having other webinars to communicate, and also in presence events in Brazil. That's my answer for you. Thank you so much, Felipe. I hope Danilo's question has been answered. I pass the floor now to Luis Carvalho, Regional Manager of Sales in South America, Tooth Highlands, South America, bringing in his presentation the certification of hydrogen for exporting purposes. Case studies. Luis, the floor is yours. Thank you so much, Zeca, and all of you. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the invitation. Greet you all. Good morning, Tooth Highlands. It's a great pleasure to welcome and talk about a topic that is hydrogen, a possible vector of changing in the energy matrix, and the qualification of this hydrogen is vital. So we can ensure that we are going to move this pathway towards decarbonization. That is the main objective of using hydrogen. I will start my presentation. Yes, we can see your presentation full mode. And before starting, just to contextualize what is our certificate, I have to explain who Tooth Highland is so you can understand the context. Tooth Highland is a German company of a sector called TIC, Testing, Inspection, and Certificate, a company that last year turned 150 years of existence, that was born during a process of certificate to ensure the bold during the German industry, always connected to inspection of boiling systems. In the final years, some data just to illustrate: more than 20,000 employees of the company, more than 2 billion euros in revenue, and the reach is very big in the market of industrial inspection, certified products, tested products, ISO certificate. And then we also have hydrogen aspect in the company. Tooth Highland has always been involved in the hydrogen chain. Hydrogen is nothing new in the market. Hydrogen is used as a source of energy over 200 years. And Tooth Highland has always been present in this chain, testing, certifying, inspecting all the chain things, inspections in solar panels, managing wind parks, certifying electrolyzers, managing pipelines, inspections, tests of material during the product manufacturing, the tanks, conformity testing, electrolyzers, always present in the full chain. But with the strength and the need of decarbonize the industry, hydrogen is getting bigger and stronger than it was in the past. And with this need of decarbonization, to get together a group of experts, scientists, engineers, professionals in the market so we could develop the best practices of hydrogen production. In TUV, what we understand as the best practice in the market, how to produce hydrogen, but this hydrogen, this guideline as a vector of explanation to the market of our understanding has brought a need of the market in qualifying that hydrogen produced as green hydrogen. Then there is this need of certificate. But as you imagine, the certificate exists from a standard. And today there is no active standard, regulated standard at a global level defined with the parameters so we can qualify auditor. TUV step back to the guideline and develop from that guideline our certificate that is voluntary. And TUV will explain to the market what we understand as possible to produce hydrogen and ensure that hydrogen is green, following some parameters that I will present following. So basically, what is our standard? And our standard has as the main objective to ensure decarbonization. So hydrogen, green hydrogen, in order to be considered renewable, hydrogen must be issued through green energy, not with big CO2 emissions, so we can really have decarbonization. But hydrogen, the market is very dynamic. It changes every month. Every webinar, we have new technology. Every week, we see newcomers to the market. That's why very humble. In order to meet the market needs, TUV has had some update in our standards. This update is first to meet the market demand and also to be something assertive according to the technology that is currently used. And the third, also to give more reach, not restricted technologies, not restricted to culture or countries. We can reach a standard that is more comprehensive. This is the conception of this standard, bringing to the market something that is more flexible and doable, not restricted. So the concept, since our first standard in the beginning, a few years ago, is cradle to X, the very beginning of the process when the hydrogen production starts up to the point defined with the client. TUV sits with the client and we define the end of the certificate. Is it in the end of a compressor, in the end of storage, in the end of the pipeline, in the beginning of the application? This is defined with the client, and from the point we define the timeline, we are going to check and consider that so we can ensure that there is decarbonization. So here we have two scopes, 1 and 2 on emission, and following the standards as it is a process for decarbonization, we have our guidelines ISO 1406040 that is about life cycle and carbon footprint. This is basic for our certificate, in addition to the guidelines of HED 2 and GHG protocol. These are really communicated and known in the market. Based on it, our certificate currently has a division, as Felipe mentioned, in a flexible way. There are two pieces of criteria. Renewable hydrogen, considered green hydrogen, is produced through electrolyzers of water, fed in energy sources that are green. And during the process, we need a confirmation of 70% reduction compared to the emission of fossil fuel. In addition to that, there is a second level that is low carbon hydrogen. This low carbon hydrogen does not limit electrolyzer technology. There are other processes and technologies in addition to the possibility of carbon emission, the CO2 emission, creating blue, turquoise, hydrogen, and consequently levels of carbon that are tolerable in this process. So, explaining in this system a diagram so I can explain step by step in our certificate. The hydrogen certificate, there is as main focus all the devices, part of its production directly, electrolyzers, units of synthesis, capture, peripheral devices, compressors, all the upstreams are calculated so we can ensure that there is no big emissions of CO2. And we are consider an emission 1, carbon emission 1, this limitation in dotted line. And this graph, we included a system of the second point of hydrogen when we can put green ammonia following the same criteria of hydrogen, but there is a second stage that I will explain following. So in the point that this diagram, this is scope 1, all this process must be followed, measured, and tracked to ensure that there is no PCF and the PCF is positive. But scope number 2, that is for electricity, we need to ensure that the electricity is green. What is green electricity? That's a point that changes and it's updated throughout the years. In our first process, in our first certificate, the energy was considered green, just sun and wind energy directly in the plant. And this restricted a lot in the market. At the second point, after the update, this energy source is still sun and wind energy, but we can also buy energy in IREX with the certificate of origin. In this point right now, that is the third update of our standard, the possibility of energy sources increased. So hydroelectric energy is considered green according to CertifHy. Wave energy, geothermal energy are considered green. So we can increase the flexibility. When we talk about biomass energy and biogas energy, they also can be considered green, but the production of that energy, of that gas, methane, from garbage, the source used, they must be calculated as energy. So there is here a higher difficulty, there is a higher need of document the energy sources, but it's permitted in this case. And then I would like to highlight some points that people ask a lot during the processes after the update of RED 2. Up to 2028, following RED 2, we do not consider the need of adding anything to the process. So there's no need to add anything. From 28 on, there is this need. So currently, our process, in order to bring more flexibility to the market, we consider the energy consumption versus the hydrogen consumption as monthly use. So I assess and analyze, this is the basic of our certificate. The hydrogen production, the amount of hydrogen must be compatible and equivalent to the amount of the energy consumed and used. If that plant has a capacity of hydrogen 100, it must receive 100% of energy. So we do not have a certificate as partial. Our certificate considers that the total capacity of that electrolyzer to produce hydrogen, how much energy is necessary, the energy that must be consumed in that plant, and that the plant can use directly using PPA, regs. That's a client's definition, and we assess it. Continuing the relationship, I talked about time, monthly base. That is also a geographic relationship here in Brazil. Is very important because we have different sites. It's a very big country. It's hard to ensure the energy. So here we have to be in the region of the bidding. This is Brazil, no problem. And currently, in this version, we do not consider RED 2 approved version about the use of 90% renewable grid. Today, if the plant is connected in the grid, we need a certificate of the origin so that process, that energy is green. And this is based on the last 12 months of the energy used. In Brazil, we did not change it yet. In Germany, it's permitted. We are still studying how to do it in Brazil. But I believe that in the following months, we are going to have this discussion together with CCE and other players in the market so we can follow the same standards as the European certificate. So following up an explanation on how it works. And we have 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. First, we document eligibility of that process, all the process of production, distribution of the chain, mass flow diagrams, volumes, energy, all the data of the upstream, everything is checked with the client. The client delivers this to us, and then we assess this with our experts. After that second point, we revise the calculations, and based on our measurement, check if there is data complexion, if the information is coherent, if there is no gap in the data. And then we go to the site. Our auditors go to the plant and check inside of everything received so we can guarantee that the information received during the process of assessment is in fact correct. So we test in the plant directly. We consider and calculate this in the plant with the electrolyzers measurement to see the production of hydrogen at that point, the use of hydrogen, so we can extrapolate and ensure the eligibility of that process. And then we have a draft with the client, and finally we issue a report that is valid for a year, test mark, and with the report we explain the process and we qualify all the documents used in that plant. This test mark is valid for a year. Any change in the plant, modernizing the equipment or changing the technology should be informed to Highland so we can recalculate it all. And if there is any change in the process, we must recertify that plant. If not, the process is valid for one more year. And finally, why this certificate exists? What does it bring? The certificate justifies the premium prices that green hydrogen, that green processes have in the market. This data I always mention, green ammonia is traded 3 times normal ammonia. So we still have an increase of the reliability and the company in the market and with the client, because we qualify and we test as third party as a 150-year-old company. We are strong in the market to ensure that the process, that company is following the sustainability standards, is following a standard of decarbonization. And finally, I would like to leave you 3 examples Marcos will talk more about white martins. We had the first certificate on green hydrogen in America. That was the certificate of white martins hydrogen in Pernambuco, a brownfield plant. We are going to talk more about it. We had a certificate of blue hydrogen in Saudi Arabia as one of the biggest oil companies, Saudi Arabia. In this case, using the same processes, but the other stamp, certificate, blue hydrogen, renewable hydrogen, and a certificate in Oman, and a full process since the green hydrogen certificate, and then transition to ammonia. All the process was qualified as a green process. And that's it, Zeca. Thank you so much. Thank you, Luis. We have people are applauding you and congratulating your presentation. Thank you so much. And also questions are coming up. I will start with the first one, Luis. And Luis, you see how interesting there is a demand on environmental declaration of the product EPD for the green hydrogen, and he's asking if there is an EPD available for green hydrogen, and if the model is cradle to gate or cradle to grave. Luis, thank you so much for your question. A point that I did not mention, but it's important to highlight, the certificate process does not consider the quality of the hydrogen, the purity of the hydrogen. What we do consider is that hydrogen was produced in a sustainable way. And this is the first point. That is a point that we discuss a lot because of the purity of the hydrogen, 99, 94, 95. We do not qualify the type of hydrogen. About cradle to X or cradle to gate, normally the certificate are cradle to X because we bring to the client is flexibility. So the client with their process, they can have information, enough information, so we qualify it. When we talk about cradle to gate, the qualification with data is lost. And then we cannot guarantee that there is sustainability in that process. Excellent, Luis. And now I will gather together Laércio, André, and Thais, connecting this question, talking about biomass, reform, biogas, and ethanol participation in the certificate. Is there any restriction of the bioma of the origin, Amazonia and Cerrado? I'd like to hear from you. The biomass in the certificate. Biomass is possible to be the source of renewable energy in that plant specifically, but all its process should be sustainable, qualified. When I mention green ammonia, for example, in order to have ammonia after hydrogen, all that process, that synthesis, everything is part of the calculation as hydrogen. What I mean is we considered it as energy, the same biomass. So there is a project, is produced, the energy source is produced from the energy of animals. I need that full process is qualified as green process. What I mean is that if you use animal product, there is a certificate called animal welfare, that animal is not suffering, there is being good, well treated. This is sustainable. Sustainable goes beyond green, you know. For a biomass process with this type of situation, all that chain must be assessed so we can qualify it as green. If it's in Cerrado or Amazon, the same process goes on. If there is a suppression, we need to see if that process is doable to be considered sustainable. Excellent, Luis. I believe you answered all the questions, but of course, our chat is open for you if you have questions or comments. More than 130 participants watching us live can ask your questions on chat on YouTube. We are going to try to get the answers from our participants. I'm here for you. Luis, thank you so much for your presentation. I hope you can watch it till the end. And now I pass the microphone to our next presenter, talking about green hydrogen certificate, a study of case in White Martins, Mr. Marcos Gonzalez, environmental and quality in White Martins.
Obrigado, Seca. Bom dia a todos.
Okay, thanks, Seca. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to first take the opportunity for us to Brazil to present the White Martins certification case in Brazil. So I'm going to share my screen here real quick. Zeca, can you see my screen? Yes, we can see your screen. Okay, I can start. So first, what we're going to see is the first green hydrogen certification case in Latin America, in Pernambuco. It's a White Martins plant, and it's a certification of plant that was already existing, a production of hydrogen by means of hydrolysis in the state of Pernambuco, and it serves the market of that state. So first, let's have an overview about White Martins, how White Martins is in the market. White Martins is part of the greatest gas company in the world, Linde. It's the largest company in the world with approximately value of approximately 180 billion, and it was formed by the fusion of two entities, a German company and an American company in 2018, Linde AG and Praxair. More than 100 countries in the world, approximately 75,000 employees all over the world. In the region here in Latin America, more than 5,000 employees, approximately 33 billion in sales in 2022. And we're an engineering company, and not only a gas production company, but an engineering company characterized over its history, more than 111 years of actuation. And we have more than 6,500 patents that are active all over the world. So our mission is to make the world more productive every day. And this is what we want to see in the future. So talking specifically about hydrogen, it's one of the pillars of growth of Linde and White Martins as well. And we participate in more than 20 organizations that support governments and industry all over the world. To enter the hydrogen market is one of founding members of the Hydrogen Council. We have been on its own side. Linde has taken all the measures required to decarbonize its operations and ensure sustainable development. And the goals for 2028 for Linde are very aggressive goals, reducing the emissions of GE in 35% until 2035. With this reduction of 35%, investments of at least 1 billion in decarbonization initiatives. It's a goal of having a third part of our budget in the development of these actions. And And the market itself for White Martins and Lindy in the hydrogen market, in terms of presence, we are present in basically all the steps of the production chain. We're not energy producers, but we have partnership with such producers. We have the technology to perform the electrolysis and produce the hydrogen. We have the capacity to liquefy hydrogen in a way that allows storage of large volumes, and also to store hydrogen in gas form. And we have some experiments to work with craters. Of course, the movement of hydrogen, we've been working with that for more than 40 years in Brazil, in the world, much more than that. So we want to, and obviously, at the end of the value chain is the use of hydrogen, not only the habitual traditional use in the chemical industry, but also we want to use it for mobility and heating as well. So White Martins has the capacity of working through the whole value chain of hydrogen. So talking about our project of green hydrogen certification, it started in 2022 in our plant in Pernambuco. So uh, green hydrogen is hydrogen produced by means of using clean and renewable energies, basically without emission of CO2. The experts can correct me if I'm wrong, but basically that's it. The green hydrogen produced by White Martins is produced by electrolysis. We have It's an existing plant, a plant that has been operating many years. It's been now been used for this production, and and the source of energy is at the use of solar power. And we have this. Uh, we the green hydrogen requires reduction of the emission of greenhouse effect gases, considering the life cycle of the product, uh, with the different resources that are used in production, and also the storage of the product. All of this is included in the product life cycle. And obviously, this hydrogen has been certified because of the carbon footprint that has been produced during production. And the main goal of the case that I want to, the main point of the case that I wanted to show you here today, what was White Martin's experience in certifying this green hydrogen. So in the beginning of the process, we defined 5 steps that would have to follow consecutively to allow us to ensure certification. The first, each step has a context which we were working with, and there were challenges that we had to face for each of these steps, and what would be our answer to each of these requirements. And of course, all the steps were first energy. Uh, the electrolysis to produce hydrogen had to be powered by a renewable source of energy. And today in Brazil, we need to. There's no absence of guarantee of the orange of this energy. So, so we need to establish a energy contract, a solar energy contract, and at the same time, we have to buy IREX to ensure 100% of the power consumed. Therefore, we were able to, we could show evidence that we had production of 100% uh, renewable energy. The second step, maybe the best explanation is not a step. This is how we were, but just to contextualize, let's call them 5 steps. The second step has been the certifying organism. So how could we do it in Brazil to ensure the scope intended? The main context uh, that we had and still have, there are no organisms in Brazil to allow such certification. Not even for the certification of green hydrogen and the scope that we had intended as well. So the main challenges is that we had to look for international entities and organisms that with certification of green production of hydrogen. And we assessed many partners, but we looked for these international organisms that could really provide this certification. And this certification, since the first moment, White Martins knew that they wanted certification of green hydrogen. So they wanted a seal for this hydrogen. And obviously, there are other certifications that we could have considered for carbon neutral hydrogen, for example, hydrogen from renewable sources. But in our heads, we wanted a seal for green hydrogen. And that was the driver. And it's easier to understand all over the world and all over the global market. And at some point, this would uh, show the pioneerism of White Martins within this industry, this sector. So when we look some certification companies in Germany that have different certification options, but within these options, this we wanted to see which one was more adapted to the scope that we had considered initially. So this led to the third step when we assessed the standards and different standards and different rules that we faced, international standards or Brazilian standards for certification. This depended on the different standards of the different certifiers that showed us that would be possible to use. And the context was that all the material was commonly, and all the analysis, all the reports, an assessment of different options were in English. And that's why we completed a process with diagnosis of the standard of each certifier, considering the local application of its requirements, and we find the best partners to continue with our journey. And we define for two hand. And since the certification was adapted to our necessity of a plant that was already existing, some characteristics that are already defined. It was not a new plant, and a plant that was implemented. And at the same time, we need to guarantee the certification of the carbon footprint up to the point that we understood that our process was. After that, we defined a contract with this institution, and we started working on step 4. It's how to integrate a new management system into White Martins management system. It's a big company, and we had our own management system regarding safety and quality and all these aspects. And within this management system, we had to include the requirements, how to answer to these requirements regarding of our own quality system. This step was probably the hardest step. It was a detailed work, and where we documented not only the inclusion of hydrogen, but the practice that we needed to adopt to maintain this life cycle of certification with zero carbon footprint all over the life cycle. And we need to elaborate this management system and train the companies to ensure that this system would really be implemented correctly. And finally, step 5, which is the formal step of a certification audit. We had already structured our management system with all the requirements and complying with all those certification requirements. And after that, it, it's 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 a standard audit with it's not specific ISO standard, but there are some particularities there that required. Uh, but this is a certification process that we knew that for the certification agency, they want to know how is our and power consumption, how to ensure the origin of this end power, and we underwent some assessment of specific details by the certification agency to understand how this could be done in our unit. And after that, the issues of the certificate with some discussions of any non-conformities that were identified. So the green hydrogen management system, which is the soul of the certification, the carbon footprint of our hydrogen, basically the goal wanted to meet the conditions required for neutral production, for production with neutral emissions. And when we selected TÜV Rheinland, like Luis mentioned, H2.21, which ensures hydrogen that is neutral in carbon, and this will define the carbon footprint of the company. And so with all that, we established our carbon footprint and we aligned that with the corporate practices, which is called green hydrogen management system. Another thing that was really important for us, it was not easy to do the calculation of the carbon footprint. We had to do a very detailed analysis of all the production steps to be able to capture all the sources of emission of carbon in our production process. And for that, we used a consultancy company that helps us with the support to conduct this activity. Regarding the life cycle of green hydrogen, it's all the consecutive steps that are interconnected related to the product, since the raw materials that are used all the way to the final treatment and end of the life cycle of the product, where the product is used. So as we mentioned previously, it was clear that the starting point was the GHG protocol, and the X point would be the end point in the life cycle of hydrogen between cradle and grave, to be defined by the company. And this includes storage of the product as well. From the perspective of impact in emissions, we had a contract with the solar power source and purchase of IREX as to ensure the origin of this renewable energy. So we had approximately emissions of 9.2 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of hydrogen. This for scope 2, right? And for scope 3, approximately 0.02% of total emissions. During our project, we knew that we needed to cancel scope 1 this was being done with the contract with the solar power producer as a certification of the origin of this energy. But uh, even though it was a very low value, considering the standard, we also decided that we wanted to zero our emissions completely in order to achieve zero emissions in reality. With we would not only be complying with the criteria of the standards, but we will always do what we understood was right. Uh, Decarbonization of as much decarbonization as possible for our plant. We not only used renewable and solar energy for the production of hydrogen and IREX as a certificate for this energy, but we also purchased IREX to compensate the emissions that are included in our process due to scope 3, and this was a voluntary compensation. These emissions that come from the product of our suppliers and so on. Therefore, we're able to, in the beginning of December 2020, with our certification in place, we were produced the first green hydrogen of South America with international certification. This shows the commitment of investing and innovating in the market of decarbonization, and this shows the pioneerism of the company. From my side, that's what I had to present to you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marcos. It's great to see that the market is open to different drivers for decarbonization, right? It's good to see all the perspectives of White Martins to really pursue and see that the end consumer is interested in paying this premium value as long as it's certified, right? So, Marcos, we have a few questions for you. I selected some that are directly related to White Martins. One is very objective. Mauricio is asking, what is the period of data of hydrogen production to calculate the carbon footprint that the certification company used? Yes, the data we used was from August. Let's do a quarterly balance of our carbon footprint. Uh, we did that. Uh, we could talk about the whole year, but we divided in 4 quarters to ensure that our carbon footprint was completely zero after this project. Yes, perfect. You also realized that the source of power generation was solar energy, right? And we just combining a few questions that we received here. Is the solar energy and wind power would be easier to certify? Why did Mike Martins select this type of energy source? Yes, we selected because clearly it has been a source that has been considered a green source of energy, and basically it was just an analysis that we did regarding the zero emissions of the source, but which one was more convenient for White Martins as well. So we selected this source because it's recognizably a green source and also the best source in terms of economic factors. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Another question that we received here was from Laercio, and he asks, regarding the product environmental statement, was it generated after all the certification process? And if this is the case, we'd like you to please, can you disclose the link or access? No, we haven't done it. We didn't have this intention at the moment, and this was not a necessity at the time. The product was already in compliance with the market. It continues to be compliant with the market. So basically, there's a plant that is sold out there's no availability for additional product. So this was one restriction from White Martins, not for prospection of sales. The certification for White Martins was a decision that we wanted to do something that had never been done in South America. So we wanted to be the pioneers and get the certification and show the market that this is the way, right? So as we understand that this is the way to follow, that's what we did. So there was no need at the time for the certification of the product. Okay, so thank you. So this is some congratulations to White Martins for being part of this pioneer movement. We have another last question here that is also related to White Martins regarding uh, emission of the infrastructure scope 3. They were neutralized with IREX, or they were not accounted for? No, they were compensated with the IREX. Okay, thank you. Yes, they were neutralized with they were compensated with IREX, not neutralized, excuse me. Is there another combination of carbon credits that White Martins uses as well in the process, or were IREX sufficient? Yes, only IREX. The IREX were sufficient to achieve the requirements of the certification company. Okay, thank you, Marcos, for your presentation and bringing all of this knowledge. For those who are still following on YouTube, please, you can still send some more questions. We can send them to Marcos. We can answer some live, but due to time constraints, we're going to follow for our next speaker. Marcos, thank you very much. I hope you can follow us for the rest of our webinar.
Então agora eu vou convidar
So now I'm gonna invite Nuria Hartman to talk about hydrogen certification for importation purposes. The study cases. Nuria Hartman is manager for Inicio. Nuria, well,
speech will be in English, so you are very welcome to deliver your presentation.
Thank you very much, José, and bom dia a todos. Vou falar em inglês porque não estou muito acostumada a falar em português. Can you confirm me just, José, that you see my screen, please?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation. I'm Nuria Hartman. I'm manager at the consultancy Inicio, based in Santiago de Chile. And today I will talk a little bit about CertifHy and the new scheme, which is currently under revision by the European Commission, and which is very important in context of exportation of hydrogen and its derivatives to European markets. So just a very few words about Inicio. We are a consultancy with a headquarter in Brussels, in Belgium, but we have also offices in Paris, in Rotterdam, and here in Latam, we are based in Santiago de Chile and in Bogota, and we have also an office in Washington, D.C., which is delivering projects to the North American market. We exist since more than 15 years, and we have worked since then in the hydrogen-related topics. You see on the right hand, we do projects related to business and strategy consulting, public policies advice, a lot of project development assistance to project developers themselves, and also advisory with regards to mergers and acquisitions and investment support. And here you see a little bit where we have delivered projects to. So in dark gray, you see we have done a lot of activities and projects in South America, also in Central America, but lots of them also in Europe. And we have like a very multidisciplinary team, international team that works together depending on the kind of project. But now coming to the main topic, and this is a certification. So first starting remembering the drivers for certification. So there are two main reasons for why the project developer aims to certify its products. The first one is because voluntary markets where the clients ask for a certification to know transparently what kind of product they are buying. So where this hydrogen or derivative has been produced, under which conditions, with which technological production methodology, etc. And this is what the nowadays called guarantees of origin scheme of CertifHy is delivering. So they are offering a certification scheme to the market under a voluntary motives because they are not complying so far with any regulation. And this is a scheme which we also see in other certification systems nowadays existing. The majority of them is for the voluntary market. They are not linked to compliance of any legal requirements. And of course, this is important so that customers are willing to pay a premium price for the product so that they really know, okay, the renewable or low carbon hydrogen I'm buying is really complying with its attributes I'm interested in to buy and which I need to decarbonize my industry or my processes. And then we have the other motive, which is the regulation compliance, which is in context of any regulation, where in this case, when we talk about Europe, we have the RED II. I understand you already heard some details about that in the morning. So the European Commission, as you know, has set binding targets and specific criteria for hydrogen, which is understood as renewable fuel, non-biological origin. And these criteria need to be fulfilled by fuel suppliers in this case. So they have to offer a certain percentage of the fuels that needs to be RFNBO compliant. And this is where certification also is required to make sure that your product is compliant with this legal requirements. And this is where I come to a clarification I want to make, because it's very easy to get lost and confused with all these different markets which has been or are under development today in the European Union. So you see there's the Maritime Fuel Directive under development, the Aviation Fuel Directive. We have the RED II, which is the thing of interest today, where the RFNBOs are defined. So which conditions they need, or hydrogen and its derivatives need to fulfill to be considered RFNBO. You see here the type of market is mandatory because there are this mandatory share for fuel suppliers in the EU. And then you have another, the RED III, which is including industry under this legal binding targets. So RED II is about fuel supply, RED III about using hydrogen and derivatives as industrial feedstock. And then there's also the CBAM, which is the line, the column which has import. So there you have also need to comply with certain criteria with regards to the carbon emission footprint of products to be imported into the European Union. But what I want to say here is it's important to understand for a project developer to which kind of market you are aiming to sell your hydrogen or ammonia, because the requirements vary depending on the specific use of that ammonia in this case, for example. So here we are interested in understanding RED II implications and ammonia, which is compatible with the RFNBO requirements. But if you sell ammonia to a client where he uses the ammonia as shipping fuel, for example, you will need to understand and consider the regulation of the EU Fuel Maritime Directive, the same for fuel, for sustainable aviation fuels, etc. So it's very important to understand, hopefully in very previous project development stages, who will be the off-taker. This is not always easy, and it's a very major challenge to find the off-takers, but in context of exportation to Europe, it's very of an advantage to know which specific market I'm targeting. But now, and this was just to organize a little bit the thoughts. So we are here in the line of RFNBO compliant fuels, mandatory markets, and then there is CertifHy. So CertifHy has been initiated at the request of the European Commission in 2014. It exists since many years already. It was financed by the Clean Hydrogen Partnership. And it is a consortium which is led by Initio, the company I'm working in. The colleagues in Europe are leading this project. And it's composed also of other players like Rexel, which is the supplier of the database of the certificates, which already is operating within EU boundaries. You have Ludwig Wölkow Systemtechnik, which is another consultancy, the Association of Issuing Bodies, which is the European Association of all issuing bodies at national level from the member states. And you have also two other players, and one of them is TÜV Süd, of course, which is the certification body within this CertifHy scheme, or auditor, as we call it. CertifHy has 3 phases. I just want to mention in phase 1, there was the definition of the scheme, so how it should work, what are the criteria, what's the methodology of working together of the actors, so how will they vote on certain criteria of the system, and they created in the second phase a stakeholder platform, which is a very important tool because it includes a lot of project developers, hydrogen power-to-X project developers, and they are working in different technical working groups to give insights on how the scheme should work. And they are very important because they give the insights as they are the beneficiaries and the users of the scheme. During that phase 2, which led from 2017 until 2019, CertifHy Guarantee of Origin scheme, they ran a pilot scheme to test if it's working, also financed by the European Union, the Commission. And then they did some adjustments, and then they started working in 2018 within European Union boundaries. And this is a scheme which is called a Guarantee of Origin scheme, and it has a book and claim system. So the physical product can be traded separately from the certificate, which allows a very good integration of this consumption of hydrogen within EU boundaries. But this is not the scheme you should be interested in because your projects are based in Brazil. And here, what is interesting and important to understand is this CertifHy is expanding in its current phase to a RFNBO compliance scheme, which is very closely aligned with all RED II criteria for RFNBOs. So in the certification, they are aligned 100% with the renewability criteria, with the temporal geographical correlation, with the additionality criterion. And they expanded the scope, which was well to gauge the emission counting scope in the first phase, which is the scheme working inside Europe, the Guarantee of Origin scheme, the green one. And they expanded it, and now it is the scope of emissions is considered well to weir, so until the point of consumption. And it takes into consideration also the transformation of the hydrogen into other derivatives, ammonia, methanol, e-fuels. And it's RFNBO compliant. So this is what is important to understand. And they are applying mass balancing because they want to measure the emissions until the point of consumption. This is also this is a scheme that nowadays is under the final revision within the European Commission. And once the delegated act, RED II, is finally published, which is expected now for July, hopefully, then also CertifHy RFNBO compliant scheme will be launched and will be available for project developers outside Europe to certify their hydrogen and derivatives so that they are RFNBO compliant and they are eligible for European markets. Yeah. And in this context, maybe as you heard, there are a lot of schemes, of course, for certification, which have all their certain specific benefits or challenges. Why choose CertifHy RFNBO scheme? Why is this important choice to make? So first of all, it's this alignment on RED II and delegated act requirements, which makes it logical to use it whenever you want to export to Europe your hydrogen derivatives, because you can comply with this criteria. And it's also the fact that it's will be validated by the European Commission. So there will be this channel with the European Commission, and they have validated the scheme. So if whenever there raise issues, it may be easier to discuss them or to find solutions, how to translate all these legal requirements, for example, from European definitions to local context in Brazil, which we know is also a major challenge in this context. So there will be this connection, this communication channel, because it's a scheme validated by the European Commission. There's also ISCC nowadays in process of validation of that scheme, for example, but they are more based, and their expertise lays more in biofuels, and CertifHy is basically very focused on power-to-X projects and working with this kind of project developers. And also, of course, it has this existing track record I already mentioned. So it's existing since 2017 with a working certification trade database provided by Grexel. Here in the graph, you see the trade of certificates during the year 2022. there have been a lot of certificates issued and transferred. Not so many have been used. This is something that is investigating right now, the cancellation volumes. But yeah, we have seen that in the last 3 years, there was a very huge increase of trade and use of certificates. And this makes the CertifHy RFNBO compliance scheme also a scheme which is based on experience and already working scheme design, database, and last but not least, again, remember the stakeholder platform, which is already existing, where a lot of project developers have given their insights on how the scheme could work and could be improved. And this is maybe some point to highlight here. Also, CertifHy, this is important to mention, has recently entered a partnership with RSB, the Roundtable of Sustainable Biofuels. This is to expand their scope and also include biofuels topics, and also be more robust in considering attributes that has to see with social and environmental attributes. For example, RSB has been advising H2 Global in their sustainability criteria. So this is a very, very strong partnership that could also facilitate the integration of different approaches and in context of financial support scheme also. And now I want to maybe give a little conclusion for all the project developers or economic operators. What should be the steps? Because we hear a lot of different markets, regulations, certification, but just to organize a little bit, which should be in our opinion and based on all the projects, more than 600 projects we have delivered to a lot of private customers. So first of all, is to understand the off-taker market, in this case, the EU off-taker market. So for what kind of application will you be selling your ammonia or hydrogen or methanol? Then understand the product eligibility criteria, because they differ with regards to the regulation as I already outlined. And then you can, or you should, this is something we've also done a lot with the project developers, is to ensure that your plant is really compliant with the regulation, because as you know, all these requirements of temporal geographical correlation, they need to be considered in the project design, in the sourcing of electricity, and what is allowed, what not, and what to do with the emission factor of the grid, how to deal with in case of an off-grid electricity source with the stable electricity supply to the electrolyzer. How can you improve this? All these kind of aspects are below this regulation compliance to optimize this. And afterwards, when you have ensured, hopefully, that your plant is compliant with this regulatory requirements, then the next step would be to see, okay, how will I certify my product? And here we have heard a lot of different options, and which may also be for the local context, for trade and commercialization within the region could be a good option. But in case you want to really sell your product to the European Union, to that markets, you need a validated scheme by the European Commission. In other cases, it may or could be difficult to ensure that you really are compliant with this RED II requirements. So this is what I summarize here as certification strategy step. And then there's the fifth step, and this is something I also want to share today very, very shortly. There's the option to do a pre-certification assessment to ensure the compliance of your plant with the legal requirements and the selected certification scheme. So this is something we call pre-certification audit or assessment. And this is something that can help to ensure that really you don't have to do adjustments after final investment decision when your project is already under construction, and then you feel, oh, okay, there are some aspects I maybe didn't consider in my plant design and in this certification, then it might be a problem. So then you see here steps 4 and 5, which is what I wanted to share today, like as case studies also, where after having understood all the regulation, after having defined the off-taker or the market, which I am focused on, do this pre-certification audit, in this case for the CertifHy RFNBO compliance scheme, together with the auditor, to understand, and these are 3 steps I summarize here. So to understand if your plant is compliant with that requirements, And this starts with 3 activities. First of one, there's like a revision of all the data of your plant, the plant design, because of course it's not operating nowadays. So it's on the design feasibility study scale, maybe. So in this case, what we offer Inicio, CertifHy, and the auditor to suit is to collect all the data, to revise them, to understand the scope, to understand the target market, and then there is done a pre-certification audit by Suit, where they revise all the documents, all the data of your project. They compare them against the RFNBO requirements. For example, what about the guarantee of origin of the electricity? What about the translation of all these requirements into local context? So which kind of bidding zone are you defining here? Is it okay to translate that requirement in this local context? So in Brazil, if it's the whole electricity system, or if it is just a sub-market, one of the 4, etc. There is a work of the validation of greenhouse gas emissions based on all the documents that the client, the economic operator, shares to see what's the emission, carbon footprint. And last but not least, also the validation of all the mass balancing of all the emissions along the supply chain until well to wheel. And then there is generated a report. Yeah, so it's not the certification itself, because as I mentioned, this is not working right now. The scheme is still under the revision of the European Commission. So nowadays, what you get is a report from the auditor with maybe red flags or highlighting gaps where your project might be not compliant with certain requirements of the legislation, and where we then do a recommendations report on how this could be solved. Yeah, so how what could be the mitigation measures to close this gap, to really in the end be compliant and to be able to move on. Why is this something very interesting for project developers? And we have had some projects already where we delivered this kind of pre-certification assessment. So first of all, it gives you a lot of trust and security and de-risk all the project, because you know, okay, there might be no problems to find an off-taker because my plant design and all my project and requirements are fulfilled. Of course, it can activate lobbying actions towards the European Commission based on the pilot results, because the scheme is validated by them and it's still in a very initial phase. So there might also be a lot of items coming up that maybe need to be addressed with the European Commission. Then, of course, you can adjust all these items. And externally, of course, secure investment decisions. Yeah, so this can de-risk, as I already said, the whole design of the project, can facilitate commercial contracts. So if you can show your future off-taker, hey, I did the pre-certification assessment, I'm compliant with the RFNBO requirements, this may help a lot to secure off-take agreements. But also to have access to maybe funding schemes that are also based on RFNBO criteria, like H2 Global, which is also aligned with RED 2. And this might help to get this kind of funding. As I already mentioned, we did this pilot certification project for some initial clients. We can't disclose all, but one of them is a very huge project under development in the Netherlands, in Groningen, which is High Netherlands. It's developed by Engie, and they have an upscaling strategy from 100 megawatt nowadays to more than 1.8 gigawatt in 2035. This project is, in its they are infrastructure projects of common European interest. So they are also of strategical importance for the European Union to get support to move on. And they have their financial investment decision in 2024. So they haven't done it so far, but they did this very interesting exercise to get their plant RFNBO compliant, to facilitate offtake of their hydrogen. And it has been demonstrated in this case, in both cases I showed here, that the plants can comply with the RFNBO certification scheme, but none of these plants that were participating in this certification pilots were 100% compliant from the beginning. So there have been also adjustments in the design, which cannot be disclosed as of the clients. We can just inform the general outcomes. but these were things that could be adjusted so that they are compliant. Now you could say, okay, but these are projects within Europe. I have a project outside Europe and I need some case studies there and to be sure that this is working, or how should I deal with this? And there I can mention that this is a very recent announcement. It was last week. This is the first RFNBO pilot certification of a project that CertifHy and CertifHy will deliver for a project outside Europe. So there's no case study finished so far. This is a project in Oman. They will produce hydrogen and ammonia to be exported to Belgium. And why am I highlighting these three aspects? So here it's important to mention that the governments are involved between Oman and Belgium and the European Commission, and they have started dialogue with the European Commission. I think that's a very important point to mention, because this can help to facilitate this translation of this RED II requirements in local context, which is a huge question mark all project developers have, not just in Brazil, also in Chile and in Colombia, etc. So I think this approach to involve the government, and I see here in Brazil also is very involved, a lot of ministries in helping project developers to move on. So this is, I think, a very important approach to search for this channel to communicate with them. And then in this case, they have had meetings already, how to give input also on the regulatory framework, to be sure that they will be eligible, because it's of the interest of both, and it will be a win-win situation. So having said this project was recently announced last week. It's nothing we can share any data or from the case study right now. And this is my last slide. I wanted to just mention that we at Inicio, we are not married just to CertifHy, because as you already heard from the presentation of Marcos before, White Martins did their certification with Finland, which is something we from Inicio here supported, which was a very, very interesting project, and very, very good that the White Martins and Linde moved on and did this very important step. And at Inicio, we are also supporting other stakeholders, other associations within their certification schemes. For example, right now there's ongoing in a global ammonia certification, which is promoted by the Ammonia Energy Association. This will be a global scheme for ammonia, without any labels, without any seals, just about reporting the emission intensity of ammonia. And this is something we are supporting, but also within the sector of fertilizers, both in Europe and in the US. The different associations, Fertilizer Institute Europe and also US, are developing schemes for certification of fertilizers. And last but not least, in the US, the Department of Energy has also started, already last year, with their clean hydrogen certification, which is also something we are supporting, specifically in the carbon intensity calculation guideline. So this was a little bit about CertifHy, the current state of progress. I hope it was not too confusing, but we have time for some questions. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigado, Núria. Eu vou
Thank you, Núria. I will speak in Portuguese, and I read the questions in Portuguese for you, if you prefer. I can ask them in English, it's up to you. Very interesting to see focus the certification because of the off-takers. If you think about certificate of ethanol, but who's going to use it in the end in Europe, for example? So this was very interesting. One of the main points that I see in your presentation, we approach RFNBO, non-biological origin. And most of the questions today in this webinar is about the fuels, biomass origin. So how can you simplify your point of view on how to work CertifHy and RED II, considering biomass reform, biogas, and ethanol, please?
First of all, yes, I talked about RFNBO because this is what CertifHy is now offering the certification for FMBOs. But of course, in case of Brazil, what you mentioned, Jose, is important with the biofuels, etc. There are definitions for biofuels eligible in the European Union in different markets. Also within this legal documents of RED, I'm not an expert in that, but there are other schemes like, for example, ISDC, which is nowadays also in validation process by the European Commission, and which has all this track record of certification of biomass and biofuels. And very likely they will play a very important role. Nowadays, what I came to you is to talk about CertifHy. We are not certifying any fuels of biological origin. We are really netamente RFMBO compliant. But for this biofuels, there is ISDC and there are other regulations defined in RED II, which ISDC also will be able to deliver because they're also in revision and validation process by the European Commission to be a validated certification scheme for biofuels imported into the European Union. So for anyone who has a project like that, I think it's worth to look into that.
Muito obrigado, Núria.
Thank you so much, Núria. I will have the next question in English. It's written in English in the chat, Giovanni.
Comply with temporal and geographical relations in green hydrogen projects connected to the grid, considering that the electricity generation is highly concentrated on coal and natural gas?
Yeah, also a good question. It's a very huge challenge. Well, nowadays there's no project besides HEAF in Patagonia so advanced to have this solved. The majority of the projects really consider off-grid solutions because of this emission factor of the grid, but they face the challenge to solve the intermittencia of the electricity for the electrolyzer, and they are considering different storage options, batteries, different options, because it's a challenge, and there's no answer I could give, no general answer. All the projects nowadays under development are, a lot of them we are advising, a lot of them have other consultancy advising them or doing in-house comparisons of different scenarios, but majority of them is really looking on off-grid. Well, in Patagonia, you don't have a very stable electricity grid, so the on-grid solution for Patagonia is very not feasible. So all the projects are looking into off-grid. But yes, in the north of Chile, you have a lot of solar energy connected to the grid, and there they are looking how to solve this, maybe with a certain connection to the grid, with a certain supply of electricity from the grid, but another major supply from an off-grid solar or wind energy plant. But this is something that's no unique answer. No.
Okay, mas bastante.
Okay, really relevant your answer, of course. All these questions about storage add value, and it's more expensive for the project. In this sense, do you believe that here in Brazil, we have projects with CapEx that are more attractive because the connection with the grid is something clean? What do you think?
I know that in Brazil, we have very high share of renewables, so like 90%, this is the requirement, could be achieved. Of course, it depends how you consider the bidding zone in this case. So if you define the submarket, Mercado Noreste, versus the whole national grid, and what the RED II requires is that you need to demonstrate that your grid is 90% renewable in the year before your plant is going to operate. So as the majority of the projects nowadays are under development and they won't start next year the operation, you need also this, how do you say this, estimaciones, so the outlook, how will be the renewability of the grid when my project will be start operation. This is what you need then to really ensure that you comply with that aspect.
Ok, perfeito. E por fim,
Okay,
Núria,
perfect. And Núria, the final question is the certificate of CertifHy helps participants of RED II global process launched in Germany. Is there any relationship? Did you support them somehow?
Initio, we didn't support anything in H2 Global. We have supported clients in the application process. This is something we have done for the first tender of ammonia, which is currently entering stage 2. But we are working with RSB, as I mentioned. We did this partnership with RSB, and they are part of the advisors of H2 Global, and they defined all the sustainability criteria, like how the plant should deal with water wastewater treatment, or how to ensure other sustainability criteria. So this is our connection with H2 Global, but in the end we have no direct connection. But it's both CertifHy, the scheme that I presented to you, and H2 Global are referring to RED II criteria. So they are both referring to this legal requirements, and which is why I told you, it makes sense to look for this compliance, because you have also opens the door for this kind of funding scheme. There will be another very huge funding scheme starting this year from the European Hydrogen Bank. They have announced very huge funds for projects outside Europe, and they will also be aligned with RED II. So it's all about this regulation, which is important when you think about exporting to Europe. Of course, there are other markets. And this project is looking into the Asian market. There you need to understand what is defining Japan in the future, medium, long term, or China or Korea, South Korea, with regards to the product eligibility criteria, which is another page, which is not the page of RED II in Europe. Europe has nowadays the more strict requirements. So maybe it's good to stick on them, because you will be very prepared for everything, and you are very open to different off-takers. I think that's maybe how it should be addressed.
Ok, perfeito, Núria. Muito obrigado pela sua
contribuição. Thank you, Núria, for your contribution. Thank you for your clarifications. I hope you can be here for our closure session. And now I'll call to the floor for a wrap-up for Giovanni Machado. He's the director of the Power Energy Research Company here in Brazil. Giovanni, you're here? Okay, great. Thank you, Zeca, and good morning, everyone. I would like to congratulate NIDAS and GIS and EHK for the H2 Brazil project with this cooperation with Brazil and Germany. This subject about certification is essential for the development of global market for hydrogen, of low carbon and green hydrogen, actually. And I just came back from an event in Rotterdam, the summit last week, and this subject was a highlight of the discussions there, actually, in not only about the certification, but how to ensure some simplicity regarding the intensity of emissions, so that this doesn't become an obstacle to entrepreneurs and enterprises and projects alike that consider green hydrogen and low carbon hydrogen. I'm pretty sure that this subject is going to be one of the highlights of next week in the Brazilian Congress of Hydrogen. I believe that there are important advancements in the discussion, and the webinar today has showed this, and also in the creation of certification platforms and the specific framework here in Brazil with the work of CCEE and commissioned by all of you. There are challenges we need to face in order to leverage from these opportunities, also speed up the development of the global hydrogen market. And there are two essential points that we consider that are effective design and simple design, focusing on carbon intensity, and mechanisms to flexibilize. You mentioned this. Flexibilization mechanisms. This was something that was mentioned in several of the presentations here today. These factors are fundamental and to reduce the risk of entrepreneurs and increase competitiveness of low carbon and green hydrogen in the market. So defining several boutique markets that are separate from each other will lead to loss of scale, reduction of hybrid business models, and segregation of infrastructures. So, and when you do this, you increase the challenges for competitiveness, risks of controversies in the global market, and complexity and risks for the entrepreneurs. These points have become more clear as we proceed with the discussion, and the webinar today deals with many of these aspects. And we're pretty sure that together we'll be able to evolve with this agenda regarding hydrogen and deliver the real needs of the global market and the hydrogen market, and specifically the delivery of the planet's climate neutrality. These messages are important. Of course, we can go further with them in the next session. It's important, but it's good that they have been discussed in the webinar. And I'm really like to thank NIDAS, JZ, and AHK for the webinar, and congratulate you for the quality of the content and all the speakers, and wish everyone a great day. Now it's with you again, Zeka. Thank you, Giovanni, for your final considerations. Now we're going to stop recording the live event, and we're going to be available in our AHK Rio channel for photo consultations. I hope you enjoyed our webinar. I hope most of the questions that have been broached here uh, were relevant for everyone. There was a lot of questions. So officially, we're ending our event of our third webinar, and we're waiting for you in the fourth webinar and the next discussions that we're going to have in the next session. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.